don't march and protest because we like to march and protest. All we want to do is be free.
Shaun King.
From New York, Shaun King. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, everybody. You know, all over social media, I've seen several different videos of police brutality over this past week. And sometimes it was fatal, other times not. But each and every time, like clockwork, victims were always Black or Latino, and the violence was completely unnecessary. Here in New York, on our subways this past week, we've had several horrible cases of police violence, and people here in the city are fed up over it. And you can't blame Republicans for this, because Democrats control every single facet of New York from top to bottom. They have the power to not only hold police accountable, but to change the root causes for the problem once and for all. And for just a few minutes this morning, I want to propose what I think has to be one of our top solutions to police violence in this country. A few years ago, I wrote a 25-part series on how we solve the crisis of police violence in America. But if I had to name only 5 ways to drastically reduce police violence, what I'm about to say would probably be one of the things that would make the cut. We just have too many police officers, way too many. I don't mean hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands. We have at least 500,000 more police officers than we actually need. And here's what I know, and I see it not only right here in New York, but I see it all over the country. Over the past 5 years, I've traveled to 45 different states studying police brutality. It's a math problem. We have too many police. In the 80s and 90s, everybody was swearing that when you wanted safer cities and safer neighborhoods, that the way to get that was with more police. But it's just not true. It's how you build mass incarceration. It's how you build the prison industrial complex. It's how you create a crisis of police violence. But if you study the safest zip codes in this country, guess what? They hardly even have police in those zip codes. I've started studying the safest cities in the United States, and they routinely have some of the smallest police departments. 10 years ago, when my family moved from Atlanta to Southern California, we lived in Irvine, California, which at the time was listed as the safest city in the country. When I first moved there, I went a week without seeing a police car, then 2 weeks, then a month, then 2 months. I lived in Irvine, California for months before I finally saw the first police car. And even then, it was just sitting in the parking lot of a grocery store. The city hardly had police. They weren't giving speeding tickets, nothing. And it wasn't because people there were perfect. Our oldest daughter went to high school there, and the first day she came home, she was shocked at how many students were openly selling and sharing drugs with one another. And guess what? In Irvine, they don't really arrest kids for drugs. They send those kids to treatment. Think of the safest areas of your city. Are they swarmed with police officers? No. The safer the area, the safer the zip code, the fewer the police. Instead of spending tens of billions of dollars on police, spend that money on social services. Spend that money on drug rehab, job placement. Spend that money on mental health services. Spend it on homelessness intervention. Some cities are now spending the single largest percentage of their budget on policing when they should be spending it on education and social services. And here's what I see. For decades, cities like New York had a program called Stop and Frisk, where they legally stopped anybody they wanted and searched them. And they did this millions of times. Well, now Stop and Frisk is illegal. But we still have the same number of police, even though they've removed millions of those arrests. Why? In some states, police used to make hundreds of thousands of arrests for weed, but now weed's not illegal. Why do we still have the same size police force if they're no longer making those arrests? Why? Because those police departments are simply going to find something to arrest people for, no matter what. We could make almost everything illegal, and they would find something else to arrest people for. Every time we decriminalize something, we need to see that police forces get smaller and smaller as well. As long as we have millions of police officers, this country will always operate like a brutal police state. Cities need to allocate those very limited resources differently And we need to look at what actually makes the safest zip code safe. Listen, I've got to run, but it's not police that are making cities safer. It's something altogether different. But here's what I see. They want to define safety for us as more police, while they define safety for themselves as prosperity, as jobs, as housing, as good schools, and so much more. We need a movement to defund police departments and use those resources in better, smarter ways. Take care, everybody.
That's a radical idea.
It sounds radical, but, man, we just have too many police officers.
But the numbers don't lie. I mean, you got the numbers. Fewer police,
and here's the thing.
fewer problems.
Yeah. Think about the safest areas in your city. They're not safe because they're overwhelmed with police. They're safe for very different reasons. The cities want to define safety, particularly in predominantly black neighborhoods, as more police. When they define safety in their own neighborhoods, it's something altogether different.
All right.
Yeah, take care, y'all.
All right, Shaun.
See you, Shaun.
Shaun King. 646464. He's on point. I'm a court clerk, and most of our arrests are silly. Interesting.